to order. The hour for which the Water Quality Management Committee had adjourned has arrived, Thursday, April 1st, 9 a.m. First item on the agenda is update on Falmouth Shellfish Survey, federal rules, potential impact, and Little Pond Inlet barrier, presented by Chuck Martinson, the Falmouth Shellfish Warden.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on first year. I really do appreciate it. So we'll cover the moorings, the Food and Drug Administration regulations, and the moorings first, and how they play into the future of kind of shellfish planning. As of this point, as of today, there are only a handful of harbors that this regulation would affect. Okay, the areas as we see it right now is the northern end of Twmp Bay, so in the mooring field up there, Eel River East, along Seacoast Shores Boulevard, Woods Hole would be another one, Great Harbor Woods Hole, and then the other one, which would really have an impact, would be Quissit. There's a lot of red tape and a lot of things involved with this, and to be completely honest with you, there's a lot of unknown because we have not actually met with the federal regulators as of yet. We have met with the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries and worked out an initial plan with them, and we are going to be going in front of the federal regulators with that plan. They have worked with the regulators in other communities up to this point, so they're pretty confident that what we've come up with will work. And what we came up with is we've carved out a couple sections of important areas, one of which is the shellfish farms, which are over in Eel River East, which do not have moorings in those areas anyways. Another thing that we've done is we're looking at, by attrition, losing some of the moorings, a small handful of them off of the Washburn Island side of Eel River East. So we're willing to work with them on that. What has happened in Woods Hole is we have met with the growers down there, and they have agreed. At this point, it's all in handshakes, but it's nothing on paper yet. They have agreed to only use that area when it would be open to shellfishing under the regulations of conditionally approved. All of these areas that we're talking about would still be open during the winter months when less than 21 boats would be on moorings. It would only affect these areas during the summer months when more than 21 people or more than 21 boats would be utilizing the moorings. So in summary, the takeaway here is it really affects 4 areas. It really doesn't change kind of our planning model all that much up to this point, because in northern end of Twmp Bay, there is some seeding that we might be considering doing up there, but there's really no more areas that we could look at putting farms in or anything else. It would be enhanced municipal seeding, which wouldn't change. In Quissit, that might be the only place that would really see the largest effect, and that would just be because, you know, Quissit is low on the kind of low-hanging fruit tree that we would just need shellfish to put that over the edge possibly. So we can look at other options there, or we can look at possibilities of using it as an initial grow out site and then moving seed out of there to move it somewhere else, or using it as a municipal growing facility in the future. It really doesn't change all that much of what we've been looking at from utilizing shellfish as an alternative option. As far as our planning and our phased approach to stuff, we're still on that track. We've really been lately working to get the rest of the bags up and built to get the full contingent and suite of bags out for the growers, and then we will as a group really move into intensively doing more of the survey work in these ponds. I've just really had to kind of put all of my resources towards that bag building at this point. So I don't know if there's any questions on that. I think we'll take that one first, and then we can talk Little Pond second. I'll just take any questions on that, if that's all right, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I know Kristen or Tom sent around the 500-page document the federal government had prepared. to explain what this was all about. You've done a much better job. But any questions from anyone on the committee on the federal intervention? Okay, fair enough. I just had one question on our shellfish surveys. At some point, you said your department was going to be having a new person come on board who would be doing that.
Right. We hired one person. So here's where we are. We had we rehired back that winter, the seasonal position. We hired them back for the winter. Our hopes were that we were going to have a significant amount of volunteers working with us to assist in the bag project. What we have found is that slowly we've been able to get the volunteer group back online. We have another meeting today at 11 o'clock with the Senior Environment Corps to talk about them jumping in with us as well. But what's happened is that full suite of labor that we hoped would come back rapidly has really kind of trickled back. It's still coming back and building up, but we're not having 25 people show up to do a project for one day. We're having 4 people show up. So to build, normally when we were in the jail and we were working with the female inmates in there, we were pushing 300, 400 bags a day. At this point, we're lucky to push 100 bags a day. So I had to put that person over to help drive that volunteer assistance with that piece. We do have 2 seasonal employees that'll be back as well, and they'll be assisting with that bag piece, which is hopefully able to bring that person over and really kind of take off on the survey end of things. And also we're stuck with weather and everything else, which is the normal winter concerns, but it's certainly a great time to be out doing the survey work right now, and we'd like to be out there doing that before building bags. But
I get it. Kristen had a letter from a Boy Scout who had 10 fellow Boy Scouts who were looking for a project.
Right. So I was talking with her about that, and normally the way that the Boy Scout projects work, the Eagle Scout projects, is they like to do a project from start to finish. If they, as a group, would be willing to take on a chunk of, say, 600 bags, we could do that, but they would not be seeing the project through from start to finish. They go through the whole planning phase, and they have to go out and get tools, and I mean, we have all that stuff at our ready right now. So it would just be labor hours. But as far as I'm concerned, we wouldn't want to turn them away, but I also want to make sure that their goals match up with what we would be asking for. Yep.
He did say that they would be willing to just help out too. When I said you guys didn't have anything, he said, if you need volunteers, he said, I can muster some scouts. So if you want, I can give you his email address.
If you could pass that to Christina, and she will reach out.
Yep.
And she's assisting on a lot of that coordination. And then Taryn's kind of doing the boots on the ground piece with them. That'd be great. Sure.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And your third and last piece was the Little Pond Inlet barrier.
Yeah, the Little Pond Inlet. So we owed you a drawing on that. Sorry, it took a little while to get over there. We did send the drawing around. Do you have that available, Kristen, to put up or not? I don't know if you do. Oh, great. Thank you. Just wait till it's up so I can explain it. And I know there was a question from the public about this as well, which we can talk about. Okay, so what you're looking at right here is basically a piece of sheet metal that would be a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch. We're not sure yet what we're going to do size wise on that. On the bottom 2 sides, we will have 2 tabs that'll cut off, which match to the best degree that we can the bottom of the river profile. If you look on the top, there's 3 separate holes that are there, which are used to lower and raise this piece of steel in and out of the system. Just to review, the goal of this project is to, when we see a storm coming and we have advance notice, and frankly, when we remember to do it, because it's really going to take some level of focus to try to predict what's going to happen with these storms, we would go in and put this piece of metal into place in the locks that are already there. There are gated locks that are there to receive this piece of metal. This has been engineered to have this ultimately happen there as it stands. The storm would go by, and whether it would be, and we would only really be putting this in a situation where we knew we would have heavy surf, winds anywhere from south to southwest to southeast, which all sweep sand, eelgrass, and everything else into Little Pond. The goal is to stop what's coming in there, building up that flood tide delta, and also distributing more sand even beyond the flood tide delta and dead eelgrass in the fall, and stopping that and making that end at the roadway, so that the issue that we deal with is from the roadway to the end of the jetties. Now, this would not stay in place for any significant amount of time. If there was a really large storm, we certainly understand that the road would wash over. Likewise, I know that there was a concern about rainfall, and what if it was a larger rainfall event than it was a wind event that caused sand to come in there. If it was a large rain event, we would not, and when we looked at it, we generally, our focus of attack here is addressing the sand coming in the system. If it's a large rain event with a smaller degree of wind and kind of increased coastal velocity or wave action, we might not even put this in. I only see this going in about maybe 4 or 5 times a year. And the hopes is that, we can extend the life of that area being, viable for egress of water, and also for water to flood the area as well. I do have, kind of speaking from personal experience, my family has owned a house on the pond for a better part of 40 years. Our basements do flood over there. I have a very keen knowledge of both our home and our neighbor's home that floods in that area and what causes them to flood. And I've known that for a number of years. And we do, we have seen that when we do open this up, it really does help the flooding in the basements as well. So I don't know if there's any kind of specific questions on this. I do understand the concern that what if the pond fills up with water and we can't get the water out? Well, it's just as simple as it really won't be going in there in just a rain situation. It will be going in there in a heavy surf situation when we know that sand will fill in that area, and it's just kind of time tested at this point. If the pond gets higher, then we can put this gate in during the low cycle of the tide, so that we do build ourselves up an envelope in there to receive water. If we do, that's an option. There's a couple ways that we can address this, but the goal was a relatively inexpensive, rapid action on our end, working with DPW to be able to fully utilize all the kind of pre-engineered aspects of what's currently there.
Any comments or questions? I know we got something in from a civilian, as it were, a comment. I don't know if you've seen it or want to address it.
Sure. Yeah. So I kind of did address it somewhat, I guess, in my presentation there. But I think the gist of it was the concern was if I can paraphrase it correctly, is that if it was more of a rain event than it was a sand movement event, the apprehension was that the pond would fill up with water and would thereby flood the basements or flood the roads or whatever. And the thought was to put essentially a clapper valve system on there that would allow water to run one way. That is, that is something we can certainly look at and could make a modification if it is necessary. We'd be absolutely willing to make that modification. But I think at this point, we do want to try to run it through a few storms and see how it works. And we can kind of make that judgment call down the road. We're certainly it's not a hard no, certainly not a hard yes, but just let us try it to begin with. And I can assure you, if people's basements are flooding, I'm going to hear about it very quickly.
Hey, Steve.
Chuck, have the 2 channels that this panel goes into
Yes.
have they ever been used before?
Yeah, good question, Steve. Thanks for that. We have used them before. We had a large, well, it was a blow-off hurricane, you know, what people think are hurricanes since Hurricane Bob, but not really a hurricane, came in, and we put plywood in there, wedged it in there, and the storm came in. We did it kind of a number of years back as a test, and it ended up working out well. You know, so yes, they have been used on one event.
So you're sure that the two channels are parallel? I
Right,
could
yeah,
see-
they're parallel. Yeah, and we did, when we cut them, the cut that we did leaves a margin of 1 inch on either side, so. Yep.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
I'd like to thank Christina for her wonderful drawing on that, and it was nice to meet out there with Kristen and Eric on that, and the DPW as well. So yeah.
All right, terrific. Okay. Thank you for that. And proactive as always, and
Thank
we
you.
appreciate
I didn't know if there were any other questions on anything else I could take, or that'll
Nope,
be it. Or
I'm not seeing any. No.
okay, great. Thank you all for your,
Thank you,
for your
Greg
time,
and
yeah,
Christina, for your work. We appreciate it. Okay, next item on the agenda is a presentation by DHD, Anastasia Rudenko, sort of bring the committee and the town up to date on where the wastewater planning has been going on the Great Pond project. A lot of it you've sort of heard in pieces as the meetings have progressed, but this is sort of a summary point where she's going to bring us up to speed on the big picture.
So I'll just first butt in and say that this presentation, Anastasia and I've worked closely on this, and we also reviewed it with the working group ahead of time. Anastasia is going to give the presentation, but I'll probably butt in a number of other times as well.
Thank you, Amy. So I'm Anastasia Rudenko. I'm an environmental engineer with GHD, presenting on the update for the Great Pond Targeted Watershed Management Plan. So we'll start with an update of the project status and goals. And then Amy will give us an update on a collection system alternative that we've been working on in the Village Common Lane area. We'll provide an update on additional discharge site characterizations that we've been working through, the centralized wastewater management scenario evaluation, and then finish up with a schedule update. So the Great Pond TWMP builds on work that was initially started as part of the Notice of Project Change report, which was submitted to the state in December 2019. This is a document that provided an update on the planning efforts for West Falmouth Harbor and Little Pond, and also provided conceptual plans for the other planning area watersheds. This next document that we're working on, that's due to the state in December 2022, works to outline a specific approach for the Great Pond watershed. And one of the major goals of this project is to identify the effluent discharge site for centralized wastewater treatment in Great Pond, and then also to look to the future. Once that document is submitted, the next step will be to submit a state revolving fund project evaluation form for the sewer construction. That project evaluation form will be submitted in August 2023. As we look at effluent discharge sites for the project, we've divided them into two categories. The first is looking at short to intermediate term, so focusing primarily on Great Ponds, and that's focusing primarily on land-based solutions. So open sand beds and subsurface effluent disposal. 3 primary sites, the Allen parcel, the Augusta parcel, and looking at optimizing open sand beds 14 and 15, which are at the wastewater treatment facility. And then as we look a little bit longer term, we're also starting to consider ocean outfalls and the potential for a regional solution with Joint Base Cape Cod.
I would say that the evaluation of we're focused, this planning is focused more on the short to intermediate term effluent discharge. We are looking at at the long term as well, because it's important to put the whole thing together. But the detailed evaluation that we're doing at this point is for discharge sites that we're looking at for the short and medium term. So this is my slide. So I did want to just talk a little bit about this. We've seen a lot of maps of this area. Actually, could you go back to the slide that shows sub-area 1 and 2? So I'm sure you guys are familiar with this, but I just wanted to...
Oh, this one here. Let me skip ahead a little bit.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Sorry if I'm making anybody
Back to
busy
the
right
beginning.
now.
Oh, yeah.
Not this
That
slide.
one. Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
this slide.
So I just wanted to be clear. I know this group has seen it, but the T-ticket Acapesket sewer service area is the entire area in tan or light yellow on this figure. But you can see there's a 1 in the on the west side and a 2 on the east side. So sub-area 1 is the northern end of northeastern end of Mara Vista and the T-ticket Path Peninsula, and that's what the sewering that we are envisioning that we can do in the short term. And then the on the east is the Acapesket Peninsula, which is the next phase beyond that 5 years later. So going back, sorry about all that. Okay, so here we are in sub-area 1. Which again is the northeast side of Mara Vista and the T-ticket Path Peninsula. When we looked at this, when the Water Quality Management Committee last saw a preliminary plan for sewering in this area, I believe what you saw was like 5 lift stations in this area, something like that. And we are, this colorful map here is just looking at is outlining a current vision for sewering in that area, which would involve the existing lift stations. The area on Mara Vista Peninsula would flow to the existing lift stations, Alphonse and Spring Bars Road, but the T-ticket Path area would flow to one of 2 lift stations, one at Village Common Drive, which you can see it's a green box off of Route 28, and a Falmouth Port lift station, which is also up near 28 within Falmouth Port. The area that's in cross-hatching there is the approximate outline of what would be sewered via low pressure or grinder pumps in this scenario. And everything else that's not in that purple cross-hatching would be gravity. This layout does assume, number 1, that we get the Village Common Drive lift station that I'm working towards right now. And number 2, that we also are able to procure a couple of easements through a couple of easements that allow us to connect wastewater over to Village Common Drive and sewer more of that St. Mark's area and Estrella and Seabrook Drive area by gravity. If we were not able to procure those easements, there'd be more low pressure sewer in this area. I have a meeting on Monday again with the property owner for Village Common Drive, and I'm hoping to be able to have the Village Common Drive lift station site, some kind of an agreement on that by the now postponed June town meeting. There are articles on that June town meeting for the lift station site and for the easements that we're looking for. So I'm hoping we'll be able to line those up and vote them, get the town meeting support to procure those at the June town meeting. So Anastasia put together this summary of, there are a total of about 600 parcels in this area that we're showing on this plan. As you can see, Falmouth Port, for example, is one big parcel, and it counts as 1 in that total of parcels. But Falmouth Port itself is more than 200 units, condo units. So the estimated number of equivalent dwelling units or sewer units for this area that we're showing is more than 800, which is also, it's a conservative number because there are other parcels here that represent more than 1 unit. So this is just at this point, using this layout, approximately what the distribution is for the parcels between gravity and low pressure. I think that's all I needed to say for that right now.
All right, thank you, Amy. The next thing that we wanted to give an update on was some of the site characterizations that we've been working through as we look at our effluent discharge evaluation to identify the next effluent discharge site, which is a series of field investigations, hydrogeological modeling, a phosphorus evaluation, and working with Mass Wildlife to identify rare species on any of the sites. So in the summer of 2020, we performed a series of hydraulic load tests at existing open sand beds 14 and 15 with the goal of assessing what is the physical hydraulic capacity of those sites, and is there a potential to send additional flow to the existing infrastructure? And I'll touch on that testing in a little more detail in a second. We also did subsurface field investigations in the winter of 2021, looking to characterize the subsurface conditions of the 3 sites we're looking at: Allen Parcel, Augusta Parcel, and existing open sand beds 14 and 15, looking to see if there's any differences between the sites that would either make it more advantageous or less advantageous as an effluent disposal site. All of these evaluations were performed with extensive support from Falmouth Public Works Engineering, who provided the surveying for all of the field work, the actual labor to dig the test pits, the soil evaluations, and the operators who helped us greatly with the hydraulic load testing, actually running that testing over the summer, and also the highway and the wastewater divisions.
Yeah, I forgot to mention parks. The Parks Department did the clearing that we needed for this and helped provide access to the sites. So this was pretty fun to and rewarding to do this work with the Public Works Department instead of paying somebody from outside. We did have a subcontractor install the do the soil borings, but the test pits themselves were done with town done by town employees with town equipment.
Yeah, and the actual soil classification for those test pits,
Right,
all of that was done through engineering, which is great. So these are the hydraulic load tests that we performed in open sand beds 14 and 15. And so we worked with the state to gain permission to send all of the flow in the summer to one bed and then to the other. So we isolated the beds one at a time. And the goal was to see if we could identify a maximum hydraulic load capacity for each bed. And to see if it can take a flow that's higher than the currently permitted maximum day flow, which for the combined system is 470,000 gallons per day, which equates to about 6 gallons per day per square foot. So we started with bed 14, and we saw that the hydraulic capacity of the bed is over 13 gallons per day per square foot without substantial ponding in the bed. We were limited by the amount of flow that was treated by the plants of the summer. So we couldn't go any higher. So we weren't able to establish a true maximum, but we do know that it can handle 13 gallons per day per square foot, which is double what the permitted capacity is for that bed. And then for bed 15, we observed an average infiltration rate of 9 gallons per day per square foot. The 2 beds did perform slightly differently, but both did perform higher than their design loading rates. So looking at the 2 beds together, combined with the hydraulic load testing results and the area in each bed, it's anticipated that the weighted loading rate for hydraulic capacity is at least 11 gallons per day per square foot, which is significantly higher than the 6 that it's currently permitted for.
So if you take a look at that photograph, what that's showing is when we were putting in more than twice the flow into bed 14, the bed was not filled, the bed was not covered with water for bed 14. So it's a pretty basic test. The difference is that it's different from what we've done previously, which is that during design, you do an infiltration test on a small area with town water, so drinking water. And this test with treated wastewater obviously gives you a realistic idea of what the bed's capacity is. And we had monitoring wells we had level loggers in the monitoring wells around the beds, so we could monitor the mound from the beds as well.
So I just wanted to provide a figure of the 3 sites that we're looking at. So open sand beds 1415, which is immediately north of the wastewater treatment facility. The Allen parcel, which is off of Falmouth Road and Carriage Stop Road in the vicinity of the Falmouth Country Club. And then the Augusta parcel, which is off of T-Ticket Highway next to Falmouth Lumber. In each of these sites, we conducted a series of field investigations. At the Allen parcel, 5 test pits and 4 soil borings. And what we're looking at is, this is the estimated footprints for the next flow that we're looking at for the T-Ticket Acapesket study area. So we're looking at gathering information through borings and test pits to identify subsurface conditions. We did a similar analysis in the Augusta parcel, again with 5 test pits and 3 soil borings. And in open sand beds 14 and 15, we focused our investigations on bed 15 to see if we could identify the difference in performance between the 2 beds, conducting 3 test pits and 2 soil borings. For the Allen parcel, we did find a layer of silt loam within 3 feet of the surface, which would likely need to be removed if the site is developed. So now that we know this information, we can build it into the cost evaluations that we'll be doing as part of the discharge evaluation. However, lower than 3 feet, we did find primarily medium to coarse sand, which is very good sand for infiltration. And the top 3 feet is something that may typically be taken off site anyways when we're developing the site. So overall, it does have good sands. In Augusta parcel, almost the entire site is medium to coarse sand, which is very good for infiltration. And then in open sand bed 15, the test pits also showed medium to coarse sand, and we identified a thin clay-like layer in 1 probe. So as next steps, we collected soil samples from all 3 of these sites, and we're having the soil samples analyzed to see if there's any differences in the characteristics between the 3 soils that would influence our decision in the future. And we're also looking at potentially doing further field investigations west of existing beds 14 and 15. As we're looking at our 3 sites, we're developing scenarios for hydrogeological modeling. We're using particle tracking to estimate where nitrogen recharged to the sites would end up. Where's the first surface water body that it would come into? And then we're also looking at groundwater mounding to see if the localized groundwater mounds that builds in any of the flow scenarios that we're looking at would be a potential concern for developing the site. So in the first site, Allen parcel, we initially ran 3 model runs in summer 2020, and we're looking to run 2 additional model runs in April 2021, looking at the flow scenarios that we'll be talking about in a little bit. For the Augusta parcel, there haven't been any model runs to date, so we'll be running our first model runs for that site in April 2021, again, characterizing where effluent nitrogen from the site would end up. In open sand beds 14, modeling was initially conducted as part of the groundwater discharge permit. We conducted 4 additional runs in summer 2020, and we're looking at doing 2 to 3 additional runs this spring. And these modeling runs will be used to inform the centralized management alternatives evaluation, looking at the nutrient load to each water body from effluent recharge. We're also conducting a phosphorus evaluation. So looking to see the effluent phosphorus in each of these, in the 2 sites, whether this is anticipated to be an issue or not. So for the Allen parcel, we're looking at downstream freshwater bodies and estuary systems in the Great Pond water system, the Coonamessett River, Parker Road Pond, which is a subset of the Coonamessett River, and Flax Pond. And then for Green Pond, Millbrook, and Bacchus Brook. And what we're looking to do is to assess the attenuation capacity of phosphorus to see if it's projected to travel downstream to any of the freshwater bodies or if it is anticipated to bind up very close to the site. A similar analysis had been conducted for open sand beds 14 and 15, and we're looking to update that evaluation with the flows that we're looking at as part of this evaluation.
A couple things here. One is that we've provided the person conducting the phosphorus evaluation with a lot of background information about phosphorus in our measured in our wastewater plant effluent, and also Chris Neal has been doing this nitrogen evaluation in the Coonamessett River for the Water Quality Management Committee, or at least for the town, as part of monitoring the Coonamessett River Restoration Project. So we've got nitrogen and phosphorus background information from Chris to inform that evaluation. As far as beds 14 and 15, we didn't include a figure here because because we're not presenting new data here and because we've evaluated quite a bit in the past. But just to reiterate, the Crocker Pond is down gradient of sand beds 14 and 15. And so we'd be looking, that's the freshwater body down gradient that we'd be looking at potential phosphorus impact from any. We have asked the consultant to look at the data that we've collected from our monitoring wells since discharge began there, and to update that evaluation for our discharge to date and for any potential increase in flow if we were to do that in the future.
So building off of what Amy outlined.
Yeah.
No, thank you. So for the Allen parcel, we'll be working to review available pond sampling data using some of the sources that Amy mentioned. We're also analyzing some of the soil samples that were pulled as part of the field investigations to be able to characterize the phosphorus attenuation capacity of the soil, and using that to do the evaluation and estimating the phosphorus absorption capacity in both unsaturated and saturated zones from the Allen parcel to the downstream freshwater receptors. And then, as Amy had mentioned, we'll be using the data that's been collected as part of the wastewater treatment plant monitoring system to update the evaluation that was previously done for open sand beds 14 and 15, and to look at the impact of the increased flows. One other thing that we've done with the 3 sites was to submit an initial rare species listing request to Mass Wildlife to see if there are any priority habitats that would be of concern on the 3 sites. So we received a letter back in February 2020 for open sand beds 14 and 15, stating that there were no priority or estimated habitats identified. And we received a similar letter for the Augusta parcel in December of 2020. The last parcel, the Allen parcel, there are 5 priority species identified on the site. So we're working to set up a teleconference with Mass Wildlife to talk about what next steps would be for that site if it was to move forward for development. So we're using all of this information that we've been talking about in a centralized wastewater management scenario evaluation. So we're developing a number of scenarios for effluent discharge. All of these scenarios are assuming that the wastewater will be treated at the current Blackstone Shop Road treatment facility, and then we're looking at where it'll be recharged. We're working with 3 different planning flows: a short-term, an intermediate, and a long-term. And we're looking at 6 different discharge alternatives, which are combinations of sites and technologies to meet the capacity requirements of the planning flows. And this evaluation will be done through an evaluation matrix that has been shared with the Water Quality Management Committee. So the first flow that we're looking at is a short-term flow called Planning Flow 1. And it includes the existing permitted flow. It includes an allocation for redevelopment within the existing sewer service area. And then it also includes the Titicaca-Acapescat sewer area. And for these planning floats, we are assuming that all of the centralized systems will be gravity. So they do include an allocation for I&I. If a portion of the system is a hybrid system or a low pressure system, we would be looking at slightly lower flows. But for planning purposes, we're including that I&I. So looking at these three components together, our first planning flow is 1.21 million gallons per day on an average annual basis.
So just to be clear, that this is the flow that we are planning for, as you see in the title here, for the next, well, through 2030. So that's first, excuse me, we're anticipating asking for funds for planning area 1 in 2024 and for planning area 2 5 years after. So this 1.21 is really what we're looking at through 2030. So this is our short-term planning area.
But because some of these sites do have the potential for expansion, we wanted to look at a more long-term picture also to assess the capacity of would you need to develop multiple sites? Can you develop a site into the future? So we're also looking at an intermediate term, which includes planning flow 1, and it includes the areas that the Water Quality Management Committee has identified for future potential sewering in the South Coast embankments, which are shown on the right here. And that's an anticipated additional 0.34 million gallons per day with a total flow of 1.55. And the last flow that we're looking at is required by Mass DEP. So our compliance approach for Great Pond includes a number of demonstration projects. The state does require us to come up with a contingency flow if some or all of those demonstration projects don't work. So what we're demonstrating to the state is that we've thought of what would happen if those didn't work. So we're not planning on this flow, but we are looking at it in our evaluation to make sure that we could accommodate it if we needed to in the future. And so that Great Pond contingency is 0.19 million gallons per day added on to our planning flow 2, which is our Great Pond, and then looking at those additional sewer service areas that have been identified for the South Coast estuaries with a total flow of 1.74. I just wanted to stop for a second and see if anyone had any questions on the three planning flows or how we develop them.
I have a question, but you can hold it till later if you want. Can you, now that we know these three numbers, can you tell us either the expected or the best or worst case for each of those three parcels?
Yes, so that's what we're actually getting to the next step of this process, where we'll be looking at can each site handle each parcel. We're doing all the different evaluations for these three different planning flows to see if one is best or worse. So that's this evaluation here. We've come up with 6 combinations of discharge scenarios because some of the sites can only handle a portion of the flow. For example, open sand beds 14 and 15 can handle some of the smaller planning flows, but it can't handle the third planning flow. So we're looking at combinations to be able to meet all 3 flows and then evaluating them based on cost, based on environmental impact, and the other considerations that are included in the matrix to answer the question that you asked, Steve.
I just want 3 numbers, one for each of those sites. At this point, I don't care about the cost. I can't hold that all in my head at one time. I just want to see the capacity in millions of gallons per day.
Oh, yes. We do have that, and I could.
And I mean, I know there are details that you're still waiting for, but I just mean a back of the envelope kind of number for Allen and Augusta and the sand beds.
Amy, you're on mute.
GHD has developed those. I don't think it's in the presentation.
Oh,
Maybe,
I trust you. You can just tell me.
well, I don't have it at the top of my head either.
Oh.
And I'd rather be referring to a previous presentation. So let's, I don't know, Anastasia, do you want to look that up during the presentation, or do you want to email the committee afterwards?
Let me email the committee afterwards, if that's okay.
Okay.
Well, can you just tell me ballpark? Will any of them take 1.55 or 1.74?
Allen parcel will, and Augusta parcel with open sand beds 14 and 15 will. And so Allen parcel also, we're looking at keeping the flow at the existing facility. But yes, both of those will meet it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
So, and this is what we'll be doing our analysis through the evaluation matrix that's been shared previously. And the last item that I wanted to provide was an update of the schedule. So we're continuing to work on the collection system alternative evaluation that Amy spoke to. We're scheduling the call with Mass Wildlife in spring 2021 and completing the phosphorus evaluation and the groundwater modeling this spring. We'll be working on a cost development for the different alternatives this spring and completing that evaluation matrix spring, summer. And the goal is to provide the draft Great Pond Target Watershed Management Plan to the Water Quality Management Committee in late fall of 2021. So with that, are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. A big picture question of this versus the ocean outfall. What's the decision philosophy? What's the logic of and the time schedule for choosing between those two options? I mean, you wouldn't do both. I would think that would be an incredible waste of money. So once you've done this, as soon as you know you're going to do this, it would be stupid to waste any more time looking into the ocean outfall. If for some reason the ocean outfall is better, then it would be stupid not to delay this as long as possible in order to use the ocean outfall.
So I think we are building towards that discussion. There are a lot of pieces. I mean, obviously just the basic capacity, can the site, what flow can the site take? The question you already asked, that's a very important one. And I think we know that physically what the capacity of the land-based discharge sites is, but we have not yet done the groundwater modeling to show where that discharge ends up, meaning where the nitrogen, the split between the nitrogen among the down gradient water bodies is. And we don't have, I mean, yes, we can all think about cost conceptually, but GHD has not yet updated the cost for these scenarios. So I think the idea is you put together all these pieces, the capacity and the environmental impacts and the costs. And when you have that all together, then you can start to really make sense of that question you're asking.
But then it sounds to me, reading between the lines, that you're saying the decision between the land versus the ocean alternatives is not a no-brainer. You need to refine the numbers because they're close enough that you need the refinement to know which is larger, which is a lower cost or total cost, including goodness or how much you like it. And that means that you need them both refined by the time you make your decision.
I think that there are a lot of factors involved, including the time frame. We're talking about 3 planning time frames right now, right? The short term, the intermediate, and the long term. And I think, yes, there is a question or we want to have an informed discussion about what we do in the short term that makes sense based on what our long-term plans might be. I don't need to be the only one responding to this. I'm giving you my take on it. I think that yes, we do need to look at the whole picture and know what our basis is. And to some people, it may seem clear already, but we're going to have those numbers and those pieces of information before us to really make that, to compare these alternatives in the short, medium, and long term.
I guess that makes it, what bothered me is one of the early slides implied that the research, the cost research on the ocean outfall was way down the road. It just gave me the feeling that you would have all the details on the land part and make that decision before you had enough details on the ocean outfall to make the comparison.
No, so the ocean outfall is in one of our discharge alternatives. It's actually in 2 of them. So all of that costing and all of that evaluation will be happening concurrently. And I just wanted to clarify on something that I misspoke on for the ultimate capacity of Augusta parcel. That can take planning flow 3 if you increase the flow to open sand beds 14 and 15 also. So with the existing permitted capacity, you would need an additional site in addition to Augusta. I just wanted to clarify that. Whereas the Allen parcel could take the 3rd planning flow in conjunction with the permitted flow. Yes, Tom?
Yeah, is it, I have no idea how this would work, but is it feasible to come up with some kind of reasonable timeline for what would be involved with the testing? I think the state requires at least 2 years of testing, modeling, sampling around a potential ocean outfall, and what the permitting, I mean, this hasn't been done before, right, in Massachusetts since the rewritten regulations? Has it? Does anyone know?
No.
Because
So there's several communities that are looking at it since
Right.
the regulations have changed, but it has not been implemented yet.
right, I could
Coalition for Buzzards Bay is well on its way to doing that for an outfall at the Maritime Academy for Wareham and Buzzards Bay. And they've gone through a lot of that process.
Okay, I don't want to, be snarky or anything, but I could easily see a 10-year timeline to get the ducks in a row and finally get the go-ahead, not the construction and not the putting it in operation with flow, but thinking about the way things work. So I would suggest, if we think the ocean outfall is a viable alternative, and I personally do, given the nature of Falmouth effluent, I think we need to figure out how to at least be moving forward on this and have some reasonable idea of what the time frame would be.
Yes, so we can come up with an anticipated preliminary permitting schedule, which I think would be very valuable to this conversation. I agree.
And I think that should be part of the evaluation
Yes.
matrix, really.
Yeah.
I think the way we've set this up is that the idea is that a goal, and I think it's an important goal, is to accomplish something in the relatively short term, and then to also be planning for the next steps. So, but I do think that time frame is an important part of the alternatives evaluation as well.
Yeah, Ron, I'm
Oh,
sort of ceded chairmanship here for a while, but get in here. Go ahead.
okay. Thanks, Eric. I have a few questions. I've been holding them for a bit here. Getting back a little bit back, I was wondering, it's great that this testing is being done, but I was just wondering, I don't recall where the funding came from for that, getting back to this ocean outfall question about which way we go. And I'm just wondering how much it has been for the, evaluating these 3 sites, 3 or 4 sites of late. That was the first question. I have a few.
You're asking about the cost of what they've done so far?
Yeah, well, in terms, yeah, the funding for that and you know, what it would, you know, because we're talking about now the questions come up about, well, if we shift ocean outfall, we're beginning to accumulate expenditures.
So I'm looking at our budget right now. So the contract that we signed with GHD to do the Great Pond Targeted Watershed Management Plan, which includes all this background evaluation. That was covered with AFC mitigation funds, and it is a $350,000 contract, of which so far we have paid $85,000.
Okay, that includes these evaluations.
Yeah.
One other thing I was wondering, and probably Amy, you know this probably well. You know, as sites beds 14 and 15 are used over time, based on experience with other beds, has there been any like clogging or something? You know, with the development of organic buildup in the soil as the nutrients flow through, or is that the other beds have just continued to flow more or less at their expected capacity?
We have operators go out and rake the beds on a regular basis. They do require a fair amount of maintenance. You would not be surprised perhaps to see how much plants like to grow in beds that are getting water and nutrients. So there is a fair amount of maintenance. We have, since the beds 9 through 13 were installed in 2005, we did go and once scrape the top, I can't remember how much, say 6 inches of sand off 1.5 of those beds and replace. Really more, yeah, because of growth than because of deposition. You get so many seeds and roots and things going on in there that it's tough to keep it free of that. So it's not expensive, you know, it's not an expensive endeavor, but there is consistent maintenance that goes on in the beds to control vegetation.
Okay, thanks. That's a good idea. I wasn't even aware of that, but it's good to know. It's good to know it's not very costly too. So the other one is the last question I think I have at the moment is that there were some comparisons done between beds 14 and 15 where you talked about gallons per day per square foot, and that was one figure. I think it was like 11 was the estimate that there was a capacity there. But then it was another that last slide of flows that was estimated like 1.2 million gallons per day. And those are, I couldn't figure out whether that 1.2 million exceeded the 11, because I can't calculate that quickly, but I could try, but anyway.
It's the same question Steve was asking.
Question I couldn't. What? No.
So with that, in order to meet, and we can talk a little bit more detail in our next update on the different scenarios that were developed. But you would need to expand those beds as well as increase the hydraulic loading capacity to meet the 1.21 without any additional sites.
Oh, okay,
but if you expanded the footprint and were able to obtain 11 gallons per day per square foot, you would meet your 1.21, that planning flow one, or you could.
So the 1.21 could be managed in those sites, is what you're saying.
So
at 11
in that
gallons,
parcel, yes.
11
Yeah, through an
that parcel.
expansion and an increase in the loading rate.
To 1.2 million or whatever, okay, per day. I did have, sorry, Eric, I did have one last question. And that was because the topic of phosphorus came up. And so, Amy, I know you've been monitoring downstream, especially of beds 14 and 15 with regard to the phosphorus flows in the soil to Crocker Pond. Is there any more, you gave a presentation some time ago, but I can't remember when, but I'm just wondering if we'll have an update on the more, you know, the recent concentrations that have been measured in the soils downstream of beds 14 and 15 and elsewhere at the other sites as well.
Sure, I'd be glad to give a presentation and update on that whenever you guys would like to put it on your schedule. I'll just say, in general, there are 2 wells that were put right in the berm at the south, or excuse me, the west end, the down gradient end of bed 14. And the goal of that was to monitor, basically to be able to look at phosphorus. You know, there's phosphorus in your effluent discharge, and these 2 wells are right down gradient of that discharge. And the idea is to see what the difference is and what the change is between when it goes on the bed, and then when it first hits the groundwater, and then 20 feet below that. So those 2 wells, they're monitoring wells 21A and 21B. They do have higher levels of phosphorus than they had when we started. The highest one, or the shallowest well had, which is basically right at groundwater surface, has increased phosphorus concentration since we began discharging, of course. And the one below that has a slightly increased phosphorus concentration. And all the other wells, it's not clear to me that there's any, I don't see a difference in phosphorus. So to me, I mean, I think we should probably be looking at the graphs and the numbers to talk about it in more detail, but the idea is, or the gist of it is that yes, you do see it right where you discharge, but then you don't see it in the wells beyond that.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, great to see that information. Thank you.
Tom.
Yeah,
Our chair, of course.
Question for Amy, I guess. Have you pulled plant material from beds 14 and 15?
Oh yeah.
Okay, because it wouldn't be too difficult to black box a phosphorus budget for that bed and see what's being removed, just like we did. I'm very serious about this, just like we did with Mill Pond, because my guess is, as any phosphorus that's available, if there's plants there during the growing season, they're gonna grab it up. And it would be nice little exercise with practical consequences to, you know, just look at the mass in a crude way of plant material removed and what its actual phosphorus concentration was. Maybe Matt or someone else could give some more insight to what might be happening there. But that's my first thought, is if we got plants growing there, they're sequestering a bunch of the phosphorus and we're taking it out, and wherever the plant material ends up, the phosphorus ends up.
Yeah, they're taking out nitrogen too. Maybe you should leave the plants.
Well, there's going to be a balancing act, but it's just a quick thought about what might be going on in the top few inches of the bed, because we know that plants, as soon as any phosphorus is available, they're going to grab it up.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting thought. I have not been thinking of it that way. I'm sure you're right that some does get taken up that way. I mean, what the operator is doing is raking the surface. So what you end up with is a pile at the corners of the beds of a mixture of grass and weeds and sand. So yeah, I guess you'd have to take out the organic, you know, you'd have to separate the plant material from the rest of it. And I don't know.
Anyway,
yeah.
Just a thought that with the beds might be serving as a phosphorus filtering apparatus in the top few inches.
There you go. Steve.
I like Tom's idea. It's sort of a land version of those ponds with the aquatic removal, the floating plants.
The floating wetlands.
But I also have a question for Amy and Anastasia. If you don't want the plant material, then one of the beds has that silt layer, 2 feet thick or something, that you have to remove.
Yeah.
What if instead of removing that, I mean, I'm sure you know this, people in this field know, you put injections through it, since the coarse sand presumably diffuses it laterally very easily, and then nothing's going to grow down there, or at least plants aren't going to grow
You
down.
mean like inject the wastewater instead of putting
Yeah, just inject it through the silt layer on top.
like a wick?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
one of those
Reverse well, but very shallow well.
A 3-foot wick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What-
Well,
what
you
holes
don't
in it?
you have dry wells.
I didn't hear Amy's answer.
Oh, I said you could have just several dry wells.
Yeah, but my question to Amy is why do you remove the silt instead of leaving it there and injecting through it?
It's greater surface area. I mean, it is an upfront construction cost, but it gives you greater surface area and I mean, an obvious thing about surface sand beds is that it's right there at the surface. You can see it, you've tested it, you know what you've got. What they do is they remove the unsuitable material and they put down a layer of exactly what you want, and you can see it and maintain it. If you're poking holes, then there are advantages to that. I mean, this wicks keep coming up again for good reason. And that is that if you poke through the layers, then you can get to different layers of more permeable material. And you can in some areas get a lot of wastewater into the ground that way. You do end up with a hole in the ground that you can't see what you're putting, you can't see it and maintain that surface as well. So, and that's one of the problems that does come up with those is maintenance. And an alternative to maintenance is just abandoning them every once in a while and putting in a new one, or maybe a supplement to maintenance.
And my other question, I want to go back. I totally agree with Tom's earlier comment, which was not snarky, that it would probably take at least 10 years just to permit the outfall. But then Amy said short-term versus long-term. Isn't it true that once you do one of these land parcels, it takes a substantial, if not 100% amount of the total outfall? Let's say it does half of it, then you've doubled the marginal cost in terms of dollars per gallon per day of any alternate technology such as an outfall.
So we will be looking at that. That is why we've got the 3 different planning flows and the different sites and the scenarios of it. Really, we do tend to, it is a very important question. You're absolutely right. It's one of the critical questions here is what do we want to do in the picture of what we want to do now. Also, it's important to also look at the same time what we might want to do in the future and what those costs are together. So I don't have the answer now, but that's exactly why we have this matrix built the way it is.
Thank you.
Tom.
Yeah, well, I'm just pursuing that thought for a moment. What's the possibility of us turning to the state and saying we can kind of cover ourselves for the next 10 or 12 years while we try to figure out if an ocean outfall will work? Is the state likely to say, go for it? Are they going to say, you got to go with what you know will work in the short to midterm? I'm very serious here again, because as Steve said, we're coming to a fork in the road. And if we decide we can get the job done with land-based systems, that's where we're going to be once we fund that and get started on it, because I don't see turning the Titanic or whatever you want to call it around mid cruise and then deciding we're going to go offshore. That's my thought. And that's why I said I would love to see somebody that knows a lot more about this than I do figure out, is the ocean outfall a practical thing, giving, and again, I pulled 10 years, off the top of my head. I have no idea what the number would be, but I think it's important for us to figure this out before we sort of set the path that we're going to have a difficult time deviating from.
That's exactly what is happening. Right. And you're right. That piece is part of the mix of options and from day one. But
On that point too, I think, if it's okay, Eric, sorry.
Sure.
With the cost of the ocean outfall, I think, somehow I came up with this notion of a blip of an idea a number of years ago, or maybe not a number of years, but the possibility of, I don't know what Mashpee is up to yet these days, whether they're still thinking about going to the base or whatever, but if our plant became like a regional facility to an extent, and we were able to, we'd have to look at all these things, but if we're doing ocean outfall, it's so costly it might be something that we could kind of connect up with maybe some of Bourne, or even with Mashpee, Mashpee down Route 151 to our, get to our plants and do the treatment of their waste there as well. It's at a cost, that would be paid to the town. But it's just another thing as we get into this, to just think out of the box a little bit and see what where there might be interest, outside of Falmouth as well.
Sure.
Since we do have a plant in the other town. So anyway.
I think Anastasia knows what Mashpee is up to.
So they're, they still haven't made the decision on the western half of town, which I see what you're saying. Of that would be the portion to send to Falmouth.
And then we could charge them, and we could, whatever the town Falmouth would. Anyway, it's just a thought. It's a cost. It's an economic question, really, in terms of cost and our capacity. But if we're as we get to this crossroad about ocean outfall versus land discharge, that becomes another factor to consider. So.
Any other comments or questions for Anastasia and Amy on this topic? They will be back. And okay, well, thank you very much. You're welcome to stay and enjoy our next item on the agenda, or you can go do some work. Whatever you choose.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you for the good questions. It's really nice to be able to work with this group to think about where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay, next item on the agenda, the Association to Preserve Cape Cod. Andrew Gottlieb is the head of that. He sent a letter around to the towns describing the situation with the county's septic management program and pointing out that it could be a lot better. Everyone got that letter? Am I right? It was sent as part of the packet. Okay, good. To put it in a nutshell, the state gives Barnstable County 0% loan money for people who want to upgrade their septic systems. The county tacks on a 5% fee for the county to administer the program. And Andrew's point is, if you're getting it from the state for 0%, you ought to be giving it to the recipients for 0%. And that basically asking the county to stop making money off of this and provide that service to the towns out of their own budget, which of course is paid for by the towns. So that the gist of it is that, and I guess the recommendation from Andrew, at least, is that we send a letter to the county commissioners telling them that's what we think they should do. Comments, questions, Tom?
Well, comment. Yeah, I see this as a two-step procedure, and timing is kind of critical here. I think we should send a message to the commissioners in general, strongly endorsing Andy's idea, but also I would like to see the same proposal be on Monday night selectmen's agenda, asking them from the committee, an endorsement from the committee, to ask the selectmen separately to strongly endorse it. That would be my plan or idea, would be to do both things.
Sure, absolutely. Any other comments or questions?
Is it anticipated that this loan, the total amount of loans, would be much larger than they are now?
Well,
I don't mean the size of each loan. I mean
Right.
the total banking business that the county does.
I mean, would there be a lot more people applying if it was 0% instead of 5%? I think that's the anticipation. Yeah.
Right. Well, not just the change in percent, but the fact that there would be all these new mandates for IAs.
Oh, yes. Looking in the long term, if IAs
Right.
became usable for general use, would there be a lot more customers for these loans? Right. Ron?
I did to go. I mean, there is a cost reality with lending money. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily 5%, but to go from 5%, which, you know, we went through all of that. We did a lot of evaluations across the state, especially the southeastern part of the state, in terms of various special legislative acts that were passed to have 0% interest in this kind of thing and we applied, the selectmen eventually in the town meeting agreed that we do 0% for the little pond system. But when it comes to some of these things, if the county takes it, if this program is still managed by the county, then for them to administer it, it's not going to be at no cost to the county. And at 0% interest, it would have to be subsidized somehow. So I don't know if it's 0% or whatever the percent is, but it seems like to not know what the true costs are, or maybe it is 5% for the county relative to risks and everything else. But I think we need an accounting of what the true cost is, and with regard to risk and other things with lending. So to endorse something straight out to go from 5% to 0%, yeah, by the in terms of the county resources and management, it seems a little bit. We need a little more. I think we need more information on that. It should be as low as possible. I agree, but we need information. I would say.
Well, I think
You're right. When this town went through that conversation around the betterment, the original state law provided for 20-year paying it back at anywhere from 2% to 5%. And the town passed its own special legislation, as you remember, which spread it out for 30 years and at 0%. And the town knew at the time that there would be a cost to the town of administering this. And Jerry Patamus was very keen on having it be 2%. I think we all looked at it and said, no, these people are doing a big favor for the town. They're paying a lot of money out. We can absorb the administrative costs and give it to them for 0%. I think the county's in the same boat right now. They can absorb this.
I think the point here is for us to make a political statement or whatever that we should shoot for 0%. And if the county administrators come back and say, for whatever reason, it's going to cost more, at least we've tried to move it to the minimum. And as I said, I also would, like to move forward in a timely manner on this, because yeah, we could do the research or talk to somebody else and see what the cost might be. But I think we should shoot for 0 and ask the selectmen to shoot for 0 too, and let the cards fall where they may.
Is it possible?
I asked Andrew, who are the people who get these loans? And most people who have a home with home equity can go to their own home equity bank and get a loan for 2.5%. Why would anybody go for 5%? And his answer was people who don't have equity, people who don't have money in their pocket, people who don't have good credit. Those are the people who have been forced to go to this 5% loan to get the work done. And so we're talking about a specific target audience, as it were. You're not talking about people who have money or people who have lots of equity or credit.
Is it possible to get the best of both worlds by having it be 0% to the consumer for the psychological advantage and financial advantage, but then let the county be subsidized by the town for the costs of actually administrating it?
The county is already heavily subsidized by the town. We send them money every year in the cherry sheet out of our pocket to pay for county expenses. It's right out of the taxpayers of Falmouth.
I wanted to mention that in the Little Pond Sewer Service Area project, it's my understanding that a number of property owners were reimbursed for the cost of, through the county septic loan program, for the cost of abandoning their septic and connecting to the sewer. So this is called a septic loan program, and it's primarily targeted to people who need to replace their septic system. And as Eric said, don't have other ways of financing that. But it was used by a number of people on the LPSA project for septic abandonment and sewer connection.
Good. All right, any further discussion or comments or questions? Can I have a motion?
I'll move my two-step procedure, all as one, I think, that we strongly endorse the proposal to lower the interest rate charged to the consumer, or the loanee, I guess you'd call them, of 0%, and at the same time strongly suggest or endorse it, suggest that the selectmen endorse it also.
That's a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, signify by putting your hand up. Okay, we got them. Any opposed? Okay, I think we're there.
And Eric, can I leave?
Unanimous, am I right? Yes. Yes.
I can't resist, since it's Tom's motion to change the word loanee to borrower.
Borrower is great. Thank you. I was struggling, as you can see, I was struggling upstream there to try to come up with something. Eric, can we leave the wording, specific wording to you? And
Sure. I mean, we've got Andrew's letter. We'll just feed off of that and send them.
I
Let them know if the committee adopted it and recommended the select and do the same.
Yeah, but I'd like to see, the selectmen's agenda has to go out late today, or?
It's too late for this one. They
Oh, it is, okay.
It'll have to be hopefully the next one.
Okay, it's business days and not calendar days, I guess.
Yeah, they get into a mad flurry on Thursday with stuff that's already in the pipeline.
Yep, okay. Wishful thinking on my part, probably.
Yes, nothing's that efficient.
Wheels of administration grind extremely fine.
Right. Okay, any reports of members and staff? Anything new with the PRB?
Let's see, we had our latest sampling round in the early part of March. The data is being put together. We'll have a meeting of the advisory group later in this month. April 28th is the proposed date for that. And then anytime after that, be happy to give this committee another update as we've done in the past.
Okay, any other reports of members and staff? Ron?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Actually, Eric, I request that you might want to talk about this a little bit. We got a note, an email. You and I got an email from the CAPS in the Acapesket area about concerns over town meeting warrant articles and eminent domain with regard to pumping stations and things. And just, it would be good to mention something in response to their inquiry. If you could do it, because you answered them directly.
Yeah, they live in the proposed sub area 1, and they were asking, what's going on? We gave them a short answer, and we also gave them a link to this meeting, because I told them Anastasia and GHD would be presenting. They apparently didn't take advantage of that, but they had sort of basic questions like, does everyone in this area have to hook up? And the answer was yes. And how much is it going to cost? They thought it was $100 million. I told them this piece was only 60, so a relative bargain. So that was the kind of question they had. Since they didn't show up, I suspect they either have jobs or found that the answer was adequate.
I think they also said that they wondered if it would be on FCTV and maybe be opting for that.
Are we on FCTV?
Yes, after the video uploads, downloads, whatever, I send it over to FCTV and they put it on. But after I get the link for the video, I will send it to the CAPS personally so that they have it.
Good idea. because you don't normally know when you're going to play these things unless you really work hard to find out. Okay, any
They're
other?
usually on demand.
We have minutes from the prior meeting, which everyone has had a chance to review, and Tom has had a chance to pick apart. What have you found?
Oh, boy. I've rolled over a few rocks here at low tide. Kristen, if we could go to item 2 on the middle of the second page,
Yep.
the third paragraph, the second sentence, when we use there and outstanding where responsibility falls, I think it should say, and I think I understood this, that the state has installed stormwater improvements that fall under town responsibility. When it says their jurisdiction, it's not clear whether it's the Falmouth DPW, the state, the town of Falmouth in general. So if you maybe read.
I think that was Peter's point too. It's not clear.
Well, yeah, I thought it was clear that once they're installed, maybe it's not, but that sentence as it's written, the pronoun there, you don't know whether you're talking about the state or the town or the DPW specifically.
Yep.
And then down at the bottom of that page, and this is what Peter said, he kept saying impervious, but I think he meant to say permeable. So the closing sentence there would say, he said,
Permeable.
the first permeable pavement project, because we've already got acres and acres and acres of impervious pavement in town.
Not relating to the minutes, but I did contact Peter afterwards and say, well, now how about this West Falmouth installation? And he was going to go have somebody look and see if in fact the state had been cleaning it out periodically before he went to go complain to them about them not doing it. So that it is actually on his list of things to follow up on, rather than just everybody throw their hands up and say it's someone else's job.
Yeah. So anyway, I just think the word permeable should be substituted, even though he said impervious. I have the feeling he meant permeable.
Big difference.
Yep.
Any other amendments to?
No, I left right after that, so I can't say.
Oh, good.
I know you didn't pick apart the last minutes either because you left.
All right. Well, we have a motion from Tom to adopt the minutes with a couple of corrections.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. For further discussion. All in favor? Hands up. Beautiful. All opposed? The ayes have it. We're good on that. The next meeting would normally be on the 14th. We don't know what we have yet for that, but so we'll just keep people posted. But that's the tentative normal date.
You mean the 15th, I think.
15th, I'm sorry. We'll keep you posted. We'll certainly know well in advance, but we don't know right now. Matt, you've stuck around long enough to give us something we've been waiting for.
Gladly. Motion to adjourn.
And I'll move adjournment.
Oh, no, you won't. That's a matter. Matt already did.
Oh, I missed that. Matt, Ron has something.
Yes.
I was just gonna second it.
That's a second. All right. Okay, moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor? Well, any discussion? No, all in favor, signify by raising the hands. Thank you again. Ron, you okay, you're there. Good. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Be safe.
Take care, everybody. Have a great week.
You too.